Hello, everyone, and welcome to She Emerge. Today, we will be discussing anxiety and how to manage anxiety. So, in this video, we will get to lean into the space and also to get a better idea of what to expect when it comes to anxiety. Again, I'm Sophia, and I'm your host for today. So, acknowledging that we're also in the month of discussing stressors and what that looks like, perhaps it is something that you have already come across in terms of anxiousness, pinpointing different patterns, what you have seen, what to look out for. So, today, again, this is not for medical advice. This podcast is simply for information, education, and so that we can all be in a space sharing. And so, with anxiety is pretty much, some of the things that we're already in the future, we're not there, but it's an anticipation, feelings of dread. If you're unsure about something, anxiety brings up a sense of jitterness, and so identifying what comes up for you. I want to also notate that when it comes to anxiety, it is also showing up somatically, meaning physically, you're also experiencing anxiety. It shows up whether it's tightening of the chest, being able to feel that uneasiness, whatever that stimulates the uncomfortable feeling, or it brings the attention to your body. And so, what I want to say is that with almost anything, there is a sense of different ways that you will be able to see where anxiety shows up. And with that, it's being able to notice some of the different stressors. As I mentioned before, this month in mental health spaces, we are highlighting stressors. What is it that you're able to notice when it comes to how we manage stressors? So again, I want to say sometimes perhaps you will also notice uh, your heart is racing. Have you ever gotten that sensation physiologically where your heart is racing really, really fast, right? And so that's also something that is considered to be natural when it comes to anxiety. So then, what I would say is when you're thinking about navigating the stressors, when it comes to anxiety, you are future oriented. You're thinking about, the future as though it has not even happened yet. So I also wanted to notice that for you to notice that when it comes to anxiety, we can look at, acute anxiety as opposed to the chronic anxiety. One meaning it's time sensitive, right? As opposed to the frequency of anxiety. And in noticing what comes up for you when it comes, to that space. Yes, we are, in a space where there's so much happening around us, right? Anxiety is on the rise. And let me pause for a second to say that it is one of the leading mental health issues that we're faced with around the world. So, based on this article that I read today, anxiety is on the rise. There's an increasing number of children and teens who are diagnosed with anxiety. And so, very often, when we think about anxiety, It's, if I want to bring more context to that, it's the uncertainty, it's the worry, it's the burden, right? When you're thinking in that category of what may come up for you. So if we shift our gaze a little bit, we're thinking about economical, you know, different things that are happening in our different social settings, right? So you think about the shift in prices, right? You're thinking about how you respond to certain obligations in life. So with that, think about this idea of how are you able to then recognize when you're seeing a recurrent pattern of anxiety. Does it make you feel a different way in your body? Because again, the body keeps score, right? It's not just a mind thing, it affects us somatically, as I said before. You're thinking about an alarm as well when it comes to anxiety. Think of it in terms of an alarm that lets you know that, hey, something is happening, danger, right? And so this is how we're able to see different signs in terms of, whether we are panicky, whether we have gone for a diagnosis and we have gotten that diagnosis. And so, thinking in terms of the disorder, how then are you able to address this? For some, they perhaps have been able to seek help, therapeutically, and they have a therapist that they're working with to address anxiety. Perhaps some have, been able to been prescribed medication based on, the level of where they're at navigating this stressor. And so life dishes out many things. And so, in terms of your own treatment plan goal, to guide your own journey in anxiety. So, for those who have just tuned in, we are speaking of managing anxiety. Perhaps you're saying, so what is anxiety? It is normal. It is normal. And so, normal in the sense that we all experience anxiety, right? So when we think about that, how we are navigating anxiety, it is something that, you know, perhaps one would say it has a tendency to consume your everyday routine. And so when I say it has a tendency to consume your everyday routine, it shows up in a way where it can affect, or I would say disrupt, the normalcy of your everyday walk, right? um, let's lean into the space to look at social anxiety and how this can impact one's life socially, in a social context, in terms of how you engage with others, right? And how that can disrupt, your everyday stressors. So, yes, you know, we want to be able to normalize that when it comes to anxiety, we're thinking of, real or imagined threats as well. And so that is where we can see how anxiety is generated. So let's look at some practical ways that we're able to hone into what's really happening and how you're able to manage anxiety. One, I would say, you know, Never underestimate the power of seeking help, reaching out for help. Whether you're able to see your therapist on a weekly basis, bi weekly, it's a good space to show up in, right? This is where you're not judged, right? This is where you are given the space, and your therapist also holds space so you can work through the different stressors in which you are confronted with. So, when it comes to the goals of managing your anxiety and to be better able to understand the reactiveness when it comes to anxiety, you may need and by no means do I mean that, you know, without seeing a therapist or a medication. Again, it's a personal preference, whether you see a Christian counselor, right, or not. There's always access to services. So when you think about anxiety, for some people, they experience anxiety in specific situations, whereas others experience it at a certain level that you're able to manage those symptoms, or the circumstances are related to when you were able to notice the onset of those symptoms, if there are any. But by all means, in recognizing anxiety related issues, I want you to be able to tune into how those thoughts, are internalized, right? And of course, what are some of those fears that you are confronted with? Because again, when you think about anxiety, when you are able to utilize some of the coping tools, I've known this to help clients, of course, when they are able to implement self talk, right? So many times I often hear clients talk about managing anxiety in a way where they're noticing positive self talk has been useful, and those self talks or statements which allow them to, you know, I'd rather say than for me to say change, I'd rather say reframe, right? Reframe those negative core messages, right? And so you're able to manage those by recognizing the patterns, recognizing the symptoms, recognizing the frequency as well. And then this way, you're able to investigate those thoughts. Are they true, right? Remember, we're not our thoughts. So, are they true? you know how are they contributing to your daily lifestyle? And so being able to, one, practice those self talks, two, create a journal is often useful because you're able to note those thought patterns, the frequency, the negative core messages, the internal monologues that we have. And so you're able to utilize a journal often for venting, of course, getting those thoughts out, venting your feelings, clarifying what the problem is, and then problem solving the situation, right? By taking those steps to confront whatever it is that comes up for you, then there are alternative ways that we're able to look at, the situation during journaling. As you become more aware of the internal self talk, you will be able to become more aware of your thoughts as opposed to your feelings. Because remember, and I really want to, to look at this in terms of thoughts affect feelings, and feelings affect actions, right? So when you choose to think more of, and this is by no means positive, affirmations only, but when you are able to think about a situation in a positive way, you're able to look at whatever that feeling is. And the more you're thinking about it in a practical way, the more you practice, because the same way we learn a behavior, it's the same way we can unlearn the behavior, right? So when you choose to think more positively about a situation, you will feel better. Likewise, when you worry excessively, right? Expect the worst to happen. When you are self critical, and then perhaps we may feel, you know, bad about that situation, whatever that situation is. Again, I said that our thoughts affect our feelings, and our feelings, our actions, right? So when we are thinking about anxiety, as I said, we're thinking about something that's not yet happening, real or imagined, depending on the context. We see these patterns of belief, and in the clinical space, we would think about it as, cognitive. Perhaps, you know, you're able to work through this from the lens of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. And so you're looking for that irrational thought pattern, right? Uh, and so if this is an approach where you're able to, look at this through those lens, then chances are you're able to engage in that space, lean into that space to ask yourself, why am I thinking what I'm thinking? What is this I am feeling? Being able to recognize the frequency, being able to recognize the pattern, what shows up, whether that looks like palpitations, discomfort in your chest, right? Muscle tension, shortness of breath, feeling dizzy, numb, all of these different things, feeling detached even from yourself, right? Some individuals may feel this sense of doom or gloom, and that is also associated with oftentimes depression, right? So whether you have experienced panic attacks, whether you have been experiencing a terrifying sense of, feeling physiologically, I wanted to help you to recognize that, those are normal um, ways to experience anxiety. And so through to my point of, whether it's acute anxiety, real or imagined, right? Um, it's still anxiety. And so, to better understand your personal reactivity to anxiety or whatever that situation may be, identifying the concerns, learning to acknowledge, right? What comes up for you so that you can get a better grasp of what you are experiencing. Again, as I mentioned in the beginning, that anxiety is a part of our everyday life. It is a normal emotion, right? I cannot overemphasize it that it's an emotion, right? We are gifted with these emotions. They're just normal, right? We're born with those emotions. And so It's an experience because we have to look at, how long is this experience that we are, going through? How long is it lasting? When was the first time you noticed that? Um, Whether, it's social anxiety, what are you noticing when you're in certain places? Do you experience this more often than not? So those things are, important. So again, I want to re, you know, emphasize that the ultimate goal to understand and to be able to manage anxiety is to get a restoration of calmness, right? And so once we're able to do that, we will be able to have more, um, you know, we will be able to have more ways how to manage the anxiety, how to manage, the stressor and not allow it to overtake us, right? And so with therapeutic intervention, this is where you will be able to address anxiety, what comes up for you. You will be able to, recognize this alarm, right? I often call it an alarm. It's like an alarm clock, right? And so it brings our attention, so to speak, to alert us when there are impending danger, right? And so this is going to be useful for us to understand how anxiety shows up in our spaces and how we're able to regulate, right? Those emotions. And for some people, they have, discussed the, the usefulness when it comes to daily exercises. That may be walking, that may be jogging, whatever that may look like. Mindfulness, of course, have proven to be very effective. So mindfulness is where we sit, right, and we're able to look at those thoughts, those distressing situations that comes up in our daily routine, and look at it without judgment, without judging yourself, because anxiety is something that puts us in a place of, you know, perhaps second guessing ourselves, puts us in a space where you're feeling overly or overthinking. That shows up in that space. And so this is just how it also changes, you know, the way our brain works. Because if you're thinking about how our brain works, we're thinking of um, our neurological pathways, right? Our nervous system, where we often look at surviving as opposed to thriving. When we're thinking of surviving, we're in the sympathetic nervous system as opposed to the parasympathetic nervous system. This is where we thrive. This is where we experience rest, right? This is where we experience grounding. This is where we experience more of a calm, right? And so, we're able to also practice our deep breathing from our diaphragm, right? And so, this will be able to help us, or to help us to manage how we navigate anxiety. You know, as we think about that, as I talk about anxiety and this sense of overwhelm, right? Perhaps you're feeling overwhelmed. Perhaps, you know, you are in a space where the negative core messages that you're getting, it's always looking out at that danger, that impending danger. It activates the way that, that alarm system shows up in our spaces, right? And how our bodies respond to that as well. Those emotions, like I said, they are normal, right? We're born with those emotions. And so anyone can experience anxiety. And so because it's normal, we want to normalize it, because it's it's a part of the stressors. Again, as I highlighted this month, and this is the last day of the month. So I want to look at stress, right? Specifically, in this episode, I wanted to look at how to manage anxiety, because stress is a major contributing factor, right? In our everyday lives. It is major. And how are we responding to the different stressors, right? Whether it's panic attacks, um, you know, perhaps it's the different sensations that we experience in our bodies. Like I mentioned before, uh, the numbness, the tingling, the muscle tensions, the pain right at the back of your neck, and you're wondering, it's somatic. These emotions are body emotions, right? They're experiences that we have, and whether we're in a space or a season where we are experiencing increased anxiety, we're looking at, okay, so is this, intensifying? What are the triggers? The increased heart palpitations, the racing of the heart, what's happening, you know, it's normal. And so if you find yourself in a space where you're contending with an increased amount of worry, and you worry about so many different things, right? And you're not able to manage that well, I would, say it does not hurt to seek, a professional, you know, help with that, right? Because again, it is normal to worry, but then it becomes problematic when it interferes, or I would say disrupts your sleeping pattern. It disrupts, your work cycle, and if you're a student, if it disrupts your study habits, if it disrupts going to your classes, the frequency of that, you're not skipping classes, right? You're not having this enormous gap in the way that you are looking at the different things in school, whether it's skipping classes or all those major factors, right? And so how is it influencing how you show up? That would be one question. How is it influencing you, how you show up in your daily routine? And yes, to, if you are already journaling, if you're already utilizing affirmations, one of the things that clients usually report back that has been helpful for them is utilizing their five senses. That's a part of the coping mechanism. you know if they are contending with panic attacks, like look around. What are you able to see? What are you able to touch? What are you able to smell? All those different things, utilizing your senses, right? This is another coping skills. And so one of the biggest thing that I would say when it comes to anxiety is what if. Huge, right? And so what if is usually followed by what if it doesn't work? What if I fail? Uh, what if I don't get the job? The what ifs. Big, big, big when it comes to anxiety. And so if you're able to reframe, what if it works? Right? What if it works? What if you land the job? What if you finish school? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so these are just different ways that you're able to look at anxiety. And so if you're able to reframe the what ifs into what if it works? You know, what's the worst case scenario that can happen? And so we want to be able to normalize, you know, even in a season where you are contending with uncertainties, so plethora of uncertainties in life. And you're listening to this podcast and you're saying, well, one of the things that you're contending with is the uncertainties of things working out, the uncertainties of, you know, you getting through the day and not experience. How are you able to manage? How are you able to, you know, overcome when you're feeling overwhelmed? I would say look at some of the things that you're able to control, right? As opposed to some things you just don't have control over, right? They're just, it just is. You just don't have control over certain things. And you don't have the capacity. Yeah. So again, look at what you have the capacity to hold space for, as opposed to what you don't have the capacity to hold space for. And that's going to be, important. Again, we talked about some of the goals in managing anxiety is to understand, you know, your own reactiveness. Um, what provokes some of that situation. What are you able to identify that is related to the concern, the presenting concern that you may have? What are some of the things that you're able to manage? What are some of the things that you're able to let go of? Right? Again, knowing what you have the capacity or the bandwidth to hold space for. Some of those things may stoke something different. Are you able to create boundaries? Are you able to cultivate, and not only cultivate, but implement boundaries? What does that look like for you? Um, what does that look like for anyone who navigates people pleasing, right? So if you are able to identify some of those things that show up in your space, then I would say you are well on your way, right? Again, what are the benefits, in terms of you being a helper, or a yes person, as opposed to being able to say, no, I would love to do that, but at this time, it's not feasible. Yeah, what does that look like for you if it no longer serves you as well? So, all of these things are important. They're going to be important when it comes to what you have the capacity for, right? And so, if you're able to look at those, you know different patterns that show up for you, and how you're able to hold space for them. To manage the anxiety requires that you identify those symptoms, right? What are the circumstances that triggers the symptoms, if any, as I mentioned before? And then, being able to identify the issues that's related to the anxiety, you will be able to pay more attention to the thought patterns that show up. Um, and so, throughout those different ideas that I just mentioned, it increases your awareness, right? And not only increases your awareness, but also you will be able to practice those self talks that I mentioned before, right? So, again, looking at what those distresses are, looking at the physical symptoms, looking at, you know, how it shows up for you, you will be able to, identify them. And over time, you will be able to lean into the space to look at it, not brush it away, but to look at it so that you can work through it. So, guys, I hope something that have been said or shared, you will find it useful as a takeaway from this podcast. And so, with that, I'd like to leave you with this: being able to identify what those situations are, di- yeah, those stressors are, will be helpful to see what are the contributing factors, and how you're able to manage well, whether it's through meditation, whether it's through journaling, finding time, where you're able to decompress, you're able to pray, you're able, to seek professional help if that's where you are, right? There's no shame there, right? And so that's going to be it for today. And as I end, I also would like to pray. Father, I thank you even at this time as we have been in this space weekly. I pray that you will help those who are experiencing distressing situations. Father, I look to you because of the God that you are, and because we know that you are able to do the hard things. So help us to trust you in times where there's that discomfort, those moments where what if overwhelms your children. And so, in those situations, help your children to realize what they have the capacity to hold space for. And as that has been shared even with you in their quiet time, may it be such that there will be honesty in communicating that to you. I speak calmness, I speak peace, I speak hope, I speak strength. And Father, I decree and declare that your daughters will experience you in another way as they have never experienced you before. And may they find a circle of friendship, of community, where they're able to speak, where they're able to share. May they not lose their voices. So as they reset, as they reclaim, and as you restore, I pray that calmness will overtake them. So have your way, God, and do as only you can do in a time of distress, in a time of fear, in the time of what ifs. Father, I pray that you will come through as you have often done. Take full control and do as only you can do. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen and amen. Thank you again for sharing your time with us. Like, share, and subscribe. Until the next podcast, be well.